All right, today we're going to try to record as many videos as possible to make up for what we've lost. We're going to start with basics. I'm going to start off with a little bit more homework that's done. Recently, I went back and I reread some more reports. A lot of reports said in 1999 there were 68,000 landowners left. I definitely know that 68,000 would include majority of my elders. And since 1999, 20 of them have just died in this community. And that's one, Thelma, Willie, Emma, Warren, Essex, Harry, Jack, Burrell guy, that's 6, Fanny, 7, Oakland's down the street, Laura and them, 8, 9, Hubert, 10, 12, 13, 11, both my uncle, 13, 14, 15. So that's just off the top of my head without getting any detail that at least 15 off the top of my head can be named since 1999 that have passed. And that's relatively not as significant to 68,000, but by it being is relatively significant to a area where that 68,000 would have been a part of that census report. An area similar to this area where 68, that 20 would have been a part of that 68,000 census report. So if we were to do that and multiply that, I'd say just a good round number of 100, we might drop it down. We might get up to 20,000 people to 30,000 people that have just probably recently died since 1999 that were landowners and that were prior farmers. The issue at hand is not the farming. The farming is something that is just a necessity for anybody who owns land. The issue at hand is the value of the land in itself. Some of these landowners, including my family, have untold amount of natural resources. Recently, the Mississippi in the Claiborne County, Mississippi, had just, which is relatively growing to a large portion. There's a growing community right now, as of right now. Recently, well, they're becoming incorporated. Recently, they just put out a large settlements for people who have found natural gas aquifers on their property. Unfortunately, I don't think that we qualified to find natural gas aquifer on our property. No one has looked. There's been smells. There's oil residue. There's definitely, when we dug our well, there's oil residue. But I don't think our vein is going to be as big as the vein that are coming directly from that area. So, to give you kind of an idea of an overview of the research that I recently did on the property, we're coming off of the Blue Mountain volcano to the Jackson volcano, coming directly down the hill from this area. So we're not exactly in lava ground or exactly in volcanic area, but we're very close to a volcanic area or a volcanic alluvial fan. So what we're doing is kind of like giving us an overview of the timberland and what's really important. What's actually important here. Now, to aid back into the issue, to aid to my case that I'm making against hip-hop, drugs, and supporting the war on drugs, the case that I'm making against hip-hop music, rap music, the rap music culture, the prison drug culture. I recently did some more research on Quiet Man County. Quiet Man's County was a place. Quiet Man's County was a place in Parchman, Mississippi, in 1920. At the time the prison farm was working, more blacks had owned property, and were heavily self-employed or readily as employed as there were whites. The black employment rate was very, very high. At this point in time, we can say that there was some problems. That is true. It wasn't perfect. It was some problems. You pick somebody up on the side of the road for not being able to afford a shirt, not being able to, you know what I'm saying. You can take somebody to jail for not having $1 or $2 in their pocket. But if you didn't have $1 or $2 in your pocket, there was still somebody that left that morning, or somebody that had a farm, or somebody that had something going on where they could pick you up in the back of a truck and take you where you can make $1, $2 to avoid jail. So you don't have to spend your 10 cents, on nothing but a loaf of bread and 20 cents on 2 or 3 pounds of meat, and that was good enough for a human being. And you could still have the entire week's worth of food saved up in 2 or 3 days. You could have enough money to end up buying you some type of cart or a car or some type of mobility, or eventually buying yourself some property, because the property at that time probably no more than $2,000 or $3,000. So within, 3 or 4 weeks, you could have, within 2 or 3 months of good hard work, hard labor, and keeping your mouth closed and your nose clean, like most of these people did out here, you could have bought you, you know what I'm saying, a substantial amount of property, or at least something where, as they would say traditionally, the racism would have been of a less effect towards you, meaning that I don't have to, out of sight, out of mind. They don't have to see me, and they don't have to see me, so they don't have to judge me. They don't have to see me, so they don't have to bother with me. So, what we're at today, as an overall arching issue, is, as a larger issue at this point, where we're at today is trying to discuss the loss of this property, and that the war on drugs is a war for black land-owning Americans, and it gives black land-owning Americans, farmers, herdsmen, particularly herdsmen are the issue, and it gives black herdsmen the opportunity to live a decent life, or to have a higher status in the society that they work towards, that they've been obedient to, that they've honored, that they've respected, and that they continue to honor and respect throughout the release of slavery and before the release of slavery. The issue here is that the issue here is an issue of civil service. I hate to, just because I guess you don't work for the civil service doesn't necessarily mean you're not part of the civil service. Every civilian serves this country. Regardless if he likes it or not, he still lives in the country and has to provide something to that country that is of some value. And he doesn't provide something of something value to that country, then we put him in jail for providing debt and hardship to that country. And that's where prison and war on drugs come in, because they provide death and hardship to the country. Recently, here this morning, I was sitting back reading an excerpt from a lawyer, and he was a scholar, Christopher Preble, Preble. He stated that the war on drugs should be ended because it has caused the loss of black American families, some black youth and black American families, mothers and fathers. But that's not what's done at. According to religious studies of land religions, such as Theravada Buddhism, Orthodox Judaism, Islam, Coptic and Western Christianity, land was the source of family. That an individuals that had property and owned property were more likely to keep their families together, even if they went through a time period like the Irish went through during the potato famine. Still coming, right now I'm speaking from an Irish descendant point of view of an Oakland, and for Oak people who carry the name of an Irish people, who would have descendants who have went through the potato famine and slavery. And I can guarantee you that through all that hardship, that we stayed together tight as nails on the board. Now, there was some conflict. There were some people that were far and distant. There were some people that, you know what I'm saying, like I say, it wasn't all beautiful. Before sticking together and not trying to physically harm each other to death, it was quite that way. The largest issue at hand in the black community is the hypersexual nature of our culture that came out of the prisons. This sounds like something and the hypersexual culture that it produced in the United States. Where the females and males are chosen by the things hanging off their bodies, whether it be their genitalia or their buttocks. So, because I'm not preaching morality, but I'm saying that as a result of that, everything has to play a role in what is taking place today. Nothing should not be left unsaid. Nothing should be left not understood and not put in this puzzle or not put in this equation to get this outcome to where we're at today. Now, my father, my mother were very skinny people. My parents that raised me. Now, my mother was a skinny lady with a flat butt. Not very attractive in the black community. You know? So not a lot of mating opportunities for her. My father was a tall, red man, with a very deep voice. And that was deeper than the deacon and deeper than the deacon and deeper than the preacher. Not very attractive in the black community. So, but what this prison culture did produce was a group of males. Now here we have on this side, which is very important here. We're gonna go back to the group of males. So let's move to this. Right here on this side here is, side note, this and this were all for blacks. Were all farmland. In fact, if you go up in here, they belong to the white, some of it belong to the white people next door. But if you go up into this area in here, you can physically see at some point in time that this land is flat and the trees that are grown probably 30 to 40 years old. So you can look at the trees and say only 30 to 40, maybe 50 years old. The oldest tree that you can find in there is 50 years old. So where we're at right now is trying to make sure that we discuss where we're at right now is to make sure that we discuss that this particular area now, this entire highway here, has been coordinated and colonized by ex-prisoners. When it originally started with educated black men and women. Some educated at white colleges, some educated at black colleges, but majority of them educated black men and women who were, in that point in time, mulattoes, and some of them dark-skinned, educated black men and women. Because we must remember, and historically, these are the gangs that were made from the Reconstruction era. And during the Reconstruction era, many blacks, dark and light skin across the board, facilitated and operated in politics after slavery and showed their competence as scholars, as literary critics, as literate people. Before Booker T. Washington became the second hero in the deal. before Booker T. Washington became literal in the deal. Now, what has taken place is that majority of these people is doing the war on drugs and doing the inception of drugs into the community, having no natural way to fight drugs and drugs itself in this particular area, because this highway was unpaved here. And we can see here the original pavement still stays here. I think that this was I don't know if it's been repaved since 1993 or 94. But you know how back in the day people kind of, get together and they put their little marks and stuff in the footprints in the road and stuff. It had to be repaved at least once because my footprints and my mother's footprints and my father's footprints was in the road right up here. We got together and we put our little Hollywood star footprints in the road, so it had to be paved at least once. Maybe we can still find some remnants of that once we get off YouTube and then do a separate video editing once this video is loaded. Some of the videos that did load or that did not load covered schizophrenia, covered PTSD, covered the mental illnesses, covered the nature of business in this area. What is really concerning is that many of these people, the descendants of these people, didn't end up on the positive side of the drug game. They ended up on the victimization side. They ended up being the people who were drug addicts. And many of the people that lived in the ghettos and they were the ex-prisoners that were more affiliated with the drug dealers or where the drugs came from became the drug dealers. Those who decided not to become the drug addicts or drug dealers or neither one of them just were laid to the side and usually bought them a herd of animals or sheep, goats, or cattle, and they were outcasts. They had homes equal to the size or better of the drug dealer's property and everything. But as a result of not being flamboyant and out there, they were not necessarily a part of the curtain call. They also were not necessarily a part of the stage that was being made at that time to make this new development of Black America. This Black America, this new drug Black America. There also, majority of the women were not big bottoms, so there's been some genetic changes at this point and after this point of slavery. If you're a good Black historian, you understand, and you've been to Africa, and you're an African historian. If you're a white historian, if you're a genetic historian, you do understand that Black genes have changed. The genes of African Americans have changed slightly over, or largely a large portion over time, because of their contact with the European masters. Now, again, these genes are changing because of the contact with the not with the European masters, but with the stages that are going on in the country with the drug game. So now this is going to be the 90s and the 80s are going to be the first time where you're going to see these large, voluptuous women with big old lips and big old butts. We never produced that before. We produce Aunt Jemimas, and we produced the traditional stereotypical Black granny or stereotypical Black maid with very large hips, with dimples in it and small lips and a keen nose. But we did not produce women as a culture with very rounded butts, meaning the butt was rounded from the top to the bottom. So even it's a sign and is signified on the genetic production of the people. We did not produce men who of large muscular structure, because the amount of work that was needed from a slave and from a Kiki Shepherd. I'm gonna say Kiki Shepherd because Kiki Shepherd is something that I'm getting from an Outkast song. And the Outkast song is directly related to this issue, and it's telling you what it accepts in the culture and what it kicks out the culture. So we're gonna say from the Black herdsmen and Black cattlemen, Black farmers, and Black people from that, and the Black and African Americans from that particular industry did not have necessarily the ability at some point in time to develop anything past that. We're gonna go briefly back over what it is like to live as an outcast of the outcasts, what it is like to live. This goes back to these young males that we were talking about. So I hope you're following. because sometimes I get a little jumbled up. But what it is like to live as an outcast of the outcast is someone who was not necessarily bred and produced for a particular stage in African American history, and what it is like to breed as someone who is not developed or bred in that situation, and what it is like to live as someone who was not bred to be, who was bred to, whose father who was bred to be 6'3" or 6'4" or 6'1" or 6 feet, but who was not bred to be 6'1" and 6 feet with bow leggeds to play basketball or to play football, who was bred to be 6'1" and upright and walk around and deal with cattle and hay and all these things of this nature. So it's been a direct assault on these particular groups of people. It's always been an assault on these particular groups of people. We can take historically from the very first inception of Southern hip hop, the very first inception of hip hop in general, not rap or gangster rap or the early 90s rap. It wasn't necessarily as bad. It was focused more on the drug game, the gangs, ending gang violence. This in particular, this generation became the descendants of those who participated in gang violence and who got more skilled at finding their targets and who got more understanding of what their targets were and got more capable of locating their targets. So you have to understand that now the importance of this video is to state that these people can fight these people. But we are not allowed to fight these people because these people don't fight with their hands. These people fight with an electronic machine. These people are electronically GPS guided by a machine that is operated and owned and operated by someone else, and it is a cover-up to take and apprehend these people, to apprehend the victim's property, land, and ownership. Now, I myself is going through three methods in which this is done. The most known method to myself is poverty is one method. There's 4 methods to which it's done. Poverty is one method. Insanity is the next method. Straight murder for being murder, meaning just murdering individuals for affiliations or closeness to or closeness or proximity to drugs or drug dealers, is another way. And 4th is through, liens, hoes, and bank liens and hoes. At this point in time, this particular property here was saved by 3 individuals from bank liens and hoes. So 3 individuals came together and we paid off liens and hoes because the old man had gotten pretty bad off financially. But the 3rd individual that got into it, then more susceptible to the drug game, brought people highly affiliated with the drug game into the area. I myself was then put into the insanity program, where we can play this individual to be insane, and we're leaving only a Christian heir who is now into the Ailing program. He's now a part of the Ailing program. So in the Ailing program is the program where the individual is too sick to actually do a lot of physical labor, which requires a lot of physical labor. The girls weren't put in any program besides the hypersexual programs, where they were allowed to be hypersexual and have sex with men who have accumulated relative sums of money for the particular area that we live in. And the larger than the most accumulative male would be, again, those drug dealers or the descendants of those drug dealers, and they would be reproducing with those drug dealers. So we can see that the war on drugs is not a war. It's not against black people. The war on drugs is against drugs. It doesn't say war on blacks. It says war on drugs. Now, my issue is hand. This guy says war on black herdsmen. He says war on black herdsmen. He says it in a code with the code representing the name of the people. It is direct. He says war on black herdsmen. He said war on black herdsmen. He said war on black herdsmen. So this is direct. The code that was pushed through, that was discussed earlier, that's pushed through the African American culture, Kiki shepherds, or Kiki in general, is the code that is being used in the hip hop culture for these people, is Kiki. All right. So that means that the descendants of here, this land belonged to some people, that descendants that live way down, to live on the other side of the highway. They no longer own it. They have a young daughter named Kiki. And she can tell you about her life as being, an ugly black woman, because that's what they call her. Even though she's not an ugly black woman, she's a black woman. I mean, she doesn't look any different than any other black woman, relatively speaking. But she can tell you about the life of being an ugly black woman. So the code that's used in hip-hop, the code amongst the hip-hoppers and the rappers in the game, it is being used, is called Kiki. This is the code for it. And the code is built off the Showtime at the Apollo person that holds the staff, that holds the hook, that pulls the person off stage or boos the person off stage when the person has made a mistake or a moral issue, said something out of the way or said something grotesque, or that a person that governs the morality of the stage, Kiki Shepard. And her staff that she uses is a hooked stick, which is similar to, and actually is, the same type of staff that is used by herders and herdsmen and shepherds. So the black code The black code that is used for this culture is Kiki or Kiki Shepard. So when you hear the rapper say the word Kiki, it is not a representation of a female. The artistic interpretation of this is a woman or a male who holds a staff, a hooked staff, or a person that boos the immoral act or the immoral representation or the bad singing of an individual off the stage. It takes a little interpretive understanding of art and understanding of the world around us to kind of understand what's going on. I myself was not an art student. I was pretty good at understanding religious art and religious painting, so I definitely had to take this from a religious point of view. So, so I had to take it directly from religion. I didn't necessarily get the information from just straight up being told what it was. So now this would suggest that many of the individuals that were a part of this, the most dangerous thing they did was probably operate a crane in their life that went into the Booker T. Washington programs. And most of them probably got severely hurt operating a crane. I have an example of my uncle over there, because most crane operators are called operators of the hook. This is a hook. This is a hook that brings you off stage. Okay.